Again, this is Build Citywide Design Challenge, Thriving Communities. And this is session 2, Empathy and Insights. I'm your host and facilitator, Mo Foster. And again, facilitator is one of my favorite words ever because I love Spanish. And the first part of the word says fácil, and facilitator, if you look it up in the dictionary, it actually means to make easy. So I'm just here to make this process easy. Fácil means easy. So I'm just here to lay some foundations so that you can smoothly glide along. All right. Today's objectives. We're going to define something called insights and understand how to collect them. And we're going to gain a deeper understanding of wellness as it relates to thriving communities because we have a special guest today. So today we'll have a warm-up. We'll revisit steps to human-centered design. We'll define insights and we'll discuss best practices for collecting insights. And then we have a special guest interview with Annie Phan. I'm super excited and you'll see why. All right, this is today's warm-up. And while, we can model it right here, but the biggest thing that I wanted facilitators to really think about is like, you can put this up on the board or you can use it on a Jamboard. This statement number 1 is, I believe people in my community feel safe. I believe people in my community feel safe. I'll model it. I'll tell you right now. I believe people in my community feel safe. It's strange because I do believe that for the most part, people in my community who feel safe because they've lived here for so long. And so we know what to navigate around. I'm not saying it's a safe community. I just know that one, there's a little bit of what we call cognitive dissonance, and you just kind of like don't think about certain things until they're in your face. And then there's also the fact that folks, when they live somewhere for a while, we pride ourselves of kind of knowing the nooks and crannies and kind of knowing the energy and knowing when it's like, oh, don't go over there, or maybe I won't walk to the store tonight, or any of those things. You feel like when you feel like you're really part of a community, sometimes you do feel safe, even if it's not the safest community. And so I can say that I agree, maybe not strongly agree. I think we're not blind to the things that happen in my neighborhood. All right. And those are the types of discussions we definitely want to have with our young people. So I hope that we're taking a moment right now. And if you're a young person watching this recording and you're not in class and you can't discuss this with somebody right away, go ahead and write that journal about these and really try to embed yourself in some of these concepts. All right. Just a reminder that this is our overarching design question. How might we build powerful, thriving communities where everyone enjoys safety, wellness, and economic freedom? This is a quote from Mo the Builder. Design is rooted in aspiration and dependent upon hope. This just comes from a place of saying that, like, when you're looking to redesign or design something, folks, no one ever says, oh, we can't make that better, because you just wouldn't even start. If you didn't think you could make it better, then you just leave it alone. Anytime you enter into a space of design, and if you're going to have a designer mindset, you have to have hope. You have to have belief. And so that's what I need you to carry with you on this journey through human-centered design. It's like some sort of sense of hope, some belief that we can make things better. How much better? Doesn't matter. Incrementally better, right? Ask the iPhone folks. I'm one of them. Half the time, I don't know what's better, but they said it was better. There's a couple things that are better. And I'm like, great, they made the phone better. This is wonderful. So that's what we're dependent upon. We're dependent upon little things, right, that make things better and make things easier. And enough of those little things and enough of those steps, that's how we might get to feeling like we have empowered, thriving communities. Again, the process that we're talking about using to solve problems is human-centered design. And so again, when we're designing things, oftentimes in the design cycle, you might lose hope. You're like, well, what am I doing? Should we be trying to make this better? Luckily for us, there are steps to take, right? So you might get into empathize and define and start saying, I don't know here. But you got to keep pushing through. And so when you push through to ideate and prototype and test, all of a sudden you're on to something. Okay. So this is what's wonderful about this. We're not just saying go out into the world and make it better. We're actually giving you a framework to use. And right now we're still in the empathize phase that was introduced on the last session during session 1. And we're going to take it a little bit further today. All right. And again, empathy, to understand the thoughts, feelings, or emotions of someone else. All right. And so we're really embedding ourselves into this process. And we'll talk about how. All right. And again, a reminder that a client is a person or organization using the services of a professional person or company, right? And we talked about in session 1 how all the young people are junior professional problem solvers in training, right? That's what's happening. And so you're learning all these problem solving steps because you are junior professional problem solvers. You've solved problems before in the past, some of your own problems, some of your friends' problems, your siblings, your parents or guardians. But this time we are really talking about you using some of your tools that you've already gained, plus some of the tools you'll learn here to solve a problem for your client. And so your client is the human at the center of your design. When you say human-centered design, the client is the human at the center of your design. But you know what? I suggest you don't take my word for it every time. You know, sometimes I need somebody here to back me up. And so here's a word from Mo the Builder.
Hey, it's Mo the Builder here, answering some important questions that relate to builduniversity.org's virtual design challenge. One question I get a lot is, Mo, what's a client? So let's take a look at what we mean by client and what your role will be in relation to the client. Now, a client is defined as a person or organization that is using the services of a professional or company. Now, I know what you're thinking. But Mo, I'm not a professional. While you may not be a professional just yet, you are an individual with a lot of insight and expertise already. For instance, many of you are expert gamers, social media masters, excellent scholars, lifelong learners, readers, emerging chefs, and super babysitters. So take a moment and ask yourself what you are really good at. You will need to lean on that as your confidence going into the challenge. Remember, you are using human-centered design to come up with a creative solution to your client's problem. Your client is the human at the center. Feel free to comment below or find me on Instagram at MoTheBuilder1 if you have any additional questions about the virtual design challenge.
You know, I don't always agree with Mo the Builder, believe it or not, but this time I'm going to say they were spot on. So again, your client is the human at the center, and this is why we are going to take this time during Empathize to gather insights, okay? And insights are an insight is a piece of information that leads to a deeper understanding. So any piece of information that leads to a deeper understanding of something, okay? And you're going to be picking these up as you go along the way. They're like your gems, your tokens, your any pickups in a video game that you have, and you got to collect so many of them before you can go to the next step. That's what these insights are. During the empathize phase, you're going to collect insights on your way to define. And we can't get to define until you collect these insights. It's just like that. So when gathering insights from client interviews, as you will on builduniversity.org, the official design challenge platform, these are some things that we're really going to take note of, okay? You have to come from a place of curiosity. I would venture to say, folks, and you know, I know this is sometimes frowned upon, but you're going to have to be nosy, okay? You're going to have to be nosy. And I know that's not hard for some of my young folks out there, okay? So I want you to be as nosy as we are when we are like 4 years deep in somebody's like pictures and comments on Instagram, someone we don't know, and we're trying to put the pieces together because we're curious. I need you to have that kind of curiosity when we're approaching our clients, okay? I want you to be aware of inconsistencies. do this. We all have these, like, if you listen to somebody long enough, they may contradict themselves. And that's not a problem to me, especially when we're gaining insight on someone. We have to ask ourselves, I wonder why they said that then, but then later on said something different. You might go back and re-listen to the video and realize it was a different context. Either way, be aware of inconsistencies and write those down, because there is a story in there. Be aware of body language. This is why it's on video, folks. This is why we're not just calling people up or just giving you the podcast version. We want you to see what their facial expressions are, what their body language is, how they're pausing, how they look at the interviewer after a question is asked. All of those things tell a story. We need those things. Lean in when you hear emotion. You know, one thing I say hear emotion because now that we wear masks, one thing I've noticed is that you can hear when somebody's smiling. Even if you can't see it, you can hear it. And so I want you to lean in when you hear emotion, lean in when you hear tones change. That's when you really want to look up and start writing down what happened. Try to put yourself in the client's shoes. Ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. Ultimately, we're trying to look around. We're trying to take everything that we've heard about the client, everything that we see about their background. And then some of this is going to be our own inferences, folks. Like your information and who you are and what you've been through and what you bring to the table is also important, right? Because sometimes we have to connect dots. People aren't going to tell us everything. You know, we're all guilty. I'm not going to tell you everything. But again, tone of voice, body language, and all of those things can be very telling. What to listen for at the minimum. Okay, these are the things you want to listen for at minimum. And I'm sure you guys will come up with all kinds of things as well. But don't dismiss any insight. Okay, if it catches your attention, make sure you make a note of it. You know, I don't want to hear folks say things like, and this is probably not important. Right? I hear it all the time in classes. Like, no, that's probably not important. And then they say something that just blows me away. And I'm like, what if you didn't share that? So if you find yourself doubting yourself, push through that and make sure you write that thing down, okay? Any and all background information. So this is like demographic information, like where they're from, their culture, age, grade in school, and even birth placement, like are you the youngest, the oldest, the only child? All of these things will help tell their story and contextualize, put into context, right? All of the things that they're telling you in other areas. You want to listen for hopes, dreams, passions, likes, dislikes. All of those things, I would say, are what drives people, right? And we need to know what is driving your client, right? Because then we'll understand further what some of their needs are, and then we'll be able to help them solve for those needs, okay? And then anything that speaks to emotions, how your client feels, right? Anytime they say, well, I feel like, write it down. Anytime they say, well, I've always anything, write it down. They're telling you about themselves. They're giving you pieces of their story, and you'll need those pieces. Again, we're collecting as many insights as possible, and we're not doubting whether or not it's an insight or not, because later we'll cluster and we'll filter and we'll do all of those things. But right now, if this were a video game, it would be about who had the most insights, all right? These are the to-dos, all right? These are the main deliverables after this session. You go to builduniversity.org. You open your student design book. The second slide in the student design book, and that's how you know, like right away before anything, it's time to gather insights, because it's the second slide in the student design book. Then you navigate back to meet the clients on builduniversity.org. You go to your chosen clients 360 environment. And if you remember from session 1, your only deliverable was to get to know the 360 environment, get to know the builduniversity.org platform, and then go ahead and choose your client. And again, it should be somebody that you feel a little bit of a connection to, but not that you feel like you already know them, right? Because then you'll start solving for problems they never said they had. right? So we want to make sure that we're able to really listen to our client, but we want to have enough of a connection that we want to build for them and make their world better. You're going to watch at least 10 videos. And I say this, and I really mean this. I say at least, okay? And I don't want to, people have been telling me all year, kids' attention spans and whatever. I have a 9th grader right here in my house. I know the attention span that child has to watch YouTube video after YouTube video after YouTube video of the same exact person, usually to me, talking about the same thing. I'm not sure. Either way, I know that she has that capacity. I know that you have that capacity. So I'm going to say 10 videos at least. But remember, we're trying to get as many insights as possible. And you might not get them without watching pretty much all the videos. And I'm going to be honest, it took me a while to realize that. But one day I just had to dive in and watch all the videos of the client. And I was like, oh, this is where we can gather as many insights as possible. That's just a pro tip. Take notes and collect at least 20 insights, folks. At least 20. That's like base level. I don't even know if we can pass to the next level with 20, but at least 20 insights, okay? None of this, I got a couple things, I think I know what they need, okay? We need a lot of insights because you'll see that it'll be hard to do the activities in the next step without at least 20 insights. And then the biggest deal is that you're trying to get to know your client. So if you write down 20 insights and you watch 10 videos and you still feel like you don't know them, then you got to keep going, keep pushing forward. Right. And again, the 360 environment really does kind of remind me of a video game, because especially for me, because those 360 video games, I'm from the old school platformer, So when it's 360 video games, chances are I have forgotten, like there are all kinds of cookies and tokens and gems that I didn't get to collect because I didn't explore the whole environment. It's the same science here. If you do not explore the whole 360 environment of your client, collect as many insights, watch as many videos, it's going to be really hard to move on to the next phase. But the wonderful thing about it is that design is iterative, meaning that we can go back and forth. And, if you need to go back and collect more insights, that's fine. But if you take my word for it now, you won't have to do that. Oh, we have Annie Phan, who is an educator of health and humanities and apparently a fellow coffee lover. Yeah, see, I'm like obsessed with she's going to share her thoughts, ideas, and wisdom on some of the terms that we're going over, like wellness and economic freedom. And one of my favorite things to discuss with people, like personally, to be quite honest, and in my circle, we've been talking about this for like the last 2-3 years. It's kind of a big thing, particularly in my community. And that's just focusing on an abundance mindset, right? And well, you know what? We're just gonna let Annie talk about it. And all right, tell me about yourself. What do you do? What is important that we should know about you?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Annie Phan or Annie Phan, depending on how you know me. I'm Vietnamese American. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So the Southwest is super, super important to my heart. And I've been living here in the Bay Area for about, I think like 8-9 years now. It's been a pretty long time. And I have been working in San Francisco Unified School District. I currently teach 8th graders. But for the last 5 years, I've been teaching high school, all 4 grades, and working particularly in teaching U.S. history and health education. And health education is a big passion of mine. And really integrating it across all disciplines is a huge thing. Yeah, I think those are the most important things to know about me. I love coffee and tea and books and blankets. Yeah, that's me.
Oh, my favorite things, Annie. And it's Annie Phan.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Annie, I've got some questions. I'm going to start with I'm going to go deep. What does it even mean to have an abundance mindset?
Oh, man. I feel like an abundance mindset. So it's interesting because I think in schools, we're so used to the buzzwords around like, a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So we know that a mindset is kind of like our orientation to our thoughts and kind of like the limits we set on ourselves or the lack thereof. It's like how we orient ourselves, right? And for me, I think something that I've noticed a lot in like my community, how I grew up, like, you know, how people spoke to me, and then also even in schools, how we talk about each other, it's all ultimately rooted in scarcity, for the idea that there's only so much of something and it's going to run out, and then that's going to be it, right? So an abundance mindset is the opposite of scarcity, and to like, and not to like kind of like be pie in the sky dream about it, but to consider or wonder like, what if we had enough, and what if we had more than enough to do all the things we wanted, and all the things that we needed, right? So it's abundance, and trying to apply that across multiple things. So not just abundance in terms of money or abundance in terms of materials, but also like maybe we have an abundance of like resourcefulness, right? Not just resources, to be able to be like, maybe we have all the skills we need in this room and all the people we need to make something happen. So that's kind of how I think about an abundance mindset.
I think that's something our students may need to carry with them in this group project, tackling such a big question. Right? Okay, I love that. What does economic freedom look like to you?
Ooh, what a hard question. I feel like right now in the pandemic and with everything going on, it's a hard thing to answer. I think economic freedom for me, I think about it literally every day because, you know, it is tied to like material resources. But economic freedom for me would be like, I would love to not be like free from consequences, but I would love to be free from like economic harm. So like economic freedom for me would be like, I don't want to feel like there's this mountain of debt hanging over my head. Hello, student loans. I don't want to feel like, and I don't want to feel like, you know, I'm moving paycheck to paycheck, but that I have the capacity to create ease in my life for myself and for others. So not that like life itself is easy, or life itself isn't easy, but I think that like money shouldn't have to be, or economic, like the economics of it shouldn't. So economic freedom for me is like that human rights are guaranteed, and that, you know, someone's human rights aren't contingent on how much money they have or their access to finances. And then that the capacity to generate resources, like financial resources themselves, isn't limited based on like our identities.
Fire. Okay. How would you define wellness?
As a health teacher in San Francisco Unified, last year during the pandemic, I started the year by talking about dimensions of health. And so I think that for me, there are kind of 4, 5-ish dimensions of health. So there is, or our wellness, right? Our capacity to be well. And I guess, hold on, let me pull back. I want to first emphasize that health or wellness is not the same thing as the absence of sickness or like absence from illness. Because, you know, actually lots of people live with chronic illness, right? And that's not to say that they're never going to be quote unquote healthy, or they're never going to have a sense of wellness. Those are two different things. But instead, there are actually just like different dimensions through which we can think about our health or our wellness, and making sure that we kind of sustain practices for all of us to be able to feel like we're whole, to be able to feel like we're like happy, to feel like we can thrive. So those dimensions for me are physical health. Like, so you meet those things through fitness, movement, you know, nutrition, our relationship to substances. There's mental and emotional. So do we have capacity to feel all our feelings, including the really big ones? Do we have the space to hold trauma when we experience it and grapple with it? There's the dimension of like mental or intellectual, right? Are we given space to like learn and grow? That's a really important part of our health. And then the last one is like spiritual. So not that we necessarily have to practice a religion, but that we have a sense of purpose, that we feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. Sometimes that's our community and our group of friends. Sometimes that's that. Oh, and the other thing is like social health, right? So social wellness, do we feel connected to our families? And the people around us. I would say those for me are the broadest categories of wellness and being able to like take care of each of those areas of our life.
Would you say there's a connection then between wellness and economic freedom?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I kind of wish that there wasn't, or like in some regards, right? Like, I think that money's kind of fun when it is supposed to communicate and exchange. Like, oh, like I have this video game and you have some money and like we're going to trade it because I want to go and have fun. That's great. But I think that economic freedom also like the capacity to build, um, money and access to different types of financial resources like a bank account, investments like a retirement fund, all those things help in the long term to build things like our access to our physical health, like being able to pay for that gym membership if that's what you want, or being able to get organic food that nourishes like your spirit, or also indulging in like a meal with your family, being able to cover the table and be like, I got you, right? For like the birthday party is also a form of like being able to create health for our communities, right? So I definitely see them as being totally interconnected.
So when we think about like our young people, when we think about teenagers, what can wellness look like for them, or what could it look like for young? I think a lot of times young people don't see a connect. We talk about these things and they're like, oh yes, as adults, and so they're not thinking about like creating habits now or what it could look like now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's so hard because I think that in schools, oftentimes we don't create the space for young people to think about those things, right? It's like, we want you to form habits, but they're habits of like, sit down in your chair and like, do this assignment right now and like, turn this in on time. And like, well, not really about you or your wellness, right? And so it's hard when our kind of environments are not signaling to us that our personal wellness matters. I would say that one kind of concrete thing that I've been doing with my students is kind of constantly reflecting on boundaries, and setting boundaries as a form of wellness, right? They're like, because really what it is that there's a famous quote that good health is just good habits. But good habits are about setting the right routines, and routines are all about boundaries, right? And like there's so many things going on in your life as a young person that are impacting that. And boundaries really are just saying, like, I'm okay with this and I'm not okay with that, right? Like, I'm okay with playing video games, but I'm not okay with like the lack of sleep that I've been getting and how dysregulated I feel, right? So then you're like, okay, are those two things related? Then I need to set a different boundary around how I play video games, right? And that's just a practice that all of us, whether we're young or old, have to deal with all the time. Or, like our social boundaries with our friends, like, I love you, but like, you texting me 37 times in a row, not feeling good for my health, right? Another boundary to set. So I think that young people like can just sit down and if they could just start off with like, what are 10 boundaries? Like even the first time a lot of people sit down, they're like, I don't even know what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with, right? Taking that initial first step goes a really long way in being able to define safety for yourself and wellness.
I love that. And I love how you mentioned that, I think when we hear boundaries, even as adults, right, at my age, we didn't talk about this as much in our 20s, but now, like when I'm looking at online and stuff, I'm just like, oh, I love this. Everybody's talking about their boundaries. There are memes, and a lot of times we're saying it now because we're trying to build ourselves up to being able to do it. But I love this idea of like, we have to set boundaries with ourselves,
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
know? Like I don't know. Yeah, that's a great one.
So that's the framework around that is thinking about like external boundaries or the boundaries we set on, like with other people, institutions, our job, and then their internal boundaries, right? So it's like even thinking about how you talk to yourself, right? If like you're really critical all the time, like that's a new boundary you have to set with yourself, because it's like, how would you feel if like someone was saying all these incredibly mean things to your friend, right? But then you're turning around on yourself. Like that's time to set an internal boundary and say that like, hey, that's not really fair for me to like talk to myself like that, right? So their internal boundaries around time, around like our mindset, around how we think are all really important for our health.
One, where were you when I was in school? Two, I'm pretty sure yours is the class where it's like, well, I'm going to Miss Phan's class. I know how schools work. It's I feel like yours is the class everyone wants to go to, and they're just not feeling it everywhere else. I would be there too. Um, I have this question. It's kind of a personal question. So there are folks in my community, right? My whole life I've heard that really believe that they have to sacrifice health and wellness, that the health and wellness piece for economic like freedom.
Mm-hmm.
What feels like economic freedom. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, in order to have that, I might have to just throw this out the window. What do we say to those folks?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yes. Well, one, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I love that in the beginning you talked about how facilitator, the root of it is about to make things easier. This year, I have a couple mantras or things that I've been reminding myself of. One of them is fun only, but the other one is let it be easy, right? Like it's such a hard thing to hold on to. Um, I think that, where do you start with that? Yeah, I think I don't want to devalue the importance of hard work. Like having seen my parents do it, also knowing that when I want something to be a really good quality, like when I'm working on something, I know it takes time, I know it takes effort, I know that it can feel hard, but that's like different from kind of like insisting that it's always hard, right? Like going through a process can be challenging, but it doesn't mean that it always has to feel that way. And in fact, like I think I was listening to Rachel Rogers. She's kind of one of my new uh, role models that I look up to. She is a Black woman who is dedicated to helping people from marginalized backgrounds like gain economic freedom and see 7 zeros in their bank accounts. And I'm like, I love that aspiration. And she talks about wanting to work hard once, right? And like working hard so that you generate ease, right? So it's not working hard to generate coin. Like it's not like you're just going to work hard to earn money. You're actually going to work really hard so that you can create more ease, so that you can create more time, so that you have more energy, right? Those are the things you really want. Because if you have money, but you don't have time, if you're not seeing your friends, like that doesn't mean anything, right? But if you're working hard to have money so that you can go out with your friends and have a really great time, that's a very different experience. I totally think we should keep working on rejecting the grind culture for sure.
Yes, yes, or shifting it, right? Like we can take terms and repurpose them.
Mm-hmm.
you you said something that made me wonder. You're familiar with the term aspirational capital?
No.
No. Oh, it's just it's something we talk about. Is basically about like having hope, right? Just folks who have hope, right? Right? It seems it's like rich. It's its own form of capital to always to always have hope and feel like things can get better, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, you just kind of keep pushing through, and I just feel like putting ourselves through things like design, human-centered design or design cycles kind of just revives this idea that like there's always hope, like if we look at things in certain ways, right? And so that's part of what we're doing with this challenge.
Absolutely. I love that.
And so I was just wondering if there are any final messages that you have for young people who are participating in this citywide challenge and taking on like this big question about thriving communities. Like, do you have any I want to say advice for them as they take care of themselves through this process?
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe one, I would go back to like the idea of resources and resourcefulness. Like you may not always have the resources that you need, but I think you can always trust in the same way that you were talking about aspirational capital, that you always have the resourcefulness, right? Like resourcefulness is infinite because it's all in here and it's in here, right? So trusting yourself and trusting your community that like, hey, we're here, we've been here, we've made it through all this, we can totally figure something out. It might not be perfect, but that's really possible. I think that developing that spaciousness for yourself emotionally goes a really, really long way. And it's the first start because sometimes we get so stuck on like, I can't get access to this. I don't have access to this. I can't talk to that person. Like, right. And then we're stuck in that scarcity model because we think we don't have that. But if we just wonder, like, what if we have everything we need to figure out the next step, like you're going to create so much ease for yourself going forward. It really doesn't have to be hard.
I could not have asked for a better message. Thank you so much. I want to open the floor now for anybody here who wants to ask some questions before we get out of here. We've got a couple minutes left, and I don't want to take up all the space because I'm having the best time. I've got all kinds of questions. But if there's anybody here who wants to either put something in the chat or who just wants to ask out loud something for our students, I just want to open the space before we close out.
Hi, I have a question based on something I know Annie has mentioned before, but students often say, like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, or like, what career path should I choose? And in Build, part of what we're doing is exposing them to lots of career paths. But for you, Annie, how does choosing a career relate or not to economic freedom? Like, how are you thinking about it and talking about it with your students?
Oh my gosh, I feel like just this year I had to flip the script for myself. So here is like a secret or what felt like a secret in broad daylight was that like streams of income are not equal to like your career or your job. Like those are actually like two different things. Like what I didn't realize is like, I'm like the daughter of a refugee and an immigrant from Vietnam. And like, we grew up in a lot of economic scarcity growing up and all these things. So in my mind, I was like, I'm just going to get a job and it's going to be able to pay enough. And then that's going to be it. Right. And like, I'm going to be financially secure, but actually like, I didn't even know that like wealth, like the idea of wealth is actually having multiple forms of income or like, finances or security coming in. Like a safety net is made of many threads, but you've got to have like many threads to hold you up. So I think like, it's like, having a healthy relationship to your finances in the first place. It's like, having maybe some passive income. Like that's what investments are, right? People setting up their retirement fund or, putting investments in the stock market. It's like, running that blog. It's having a day job that you do and you feel good about. But like, there's actually a lot of different parts to it. So I think that if I had known that as a younger person, I wouldn't have put so much pressure on myself to like pick the right job with the right income. And I've been like, I'm going to find the right work for me. And I'm also going to build out lots of different types of income because like, you also never know when you're going to get laid off or all these things, right? So you've got to have multiple things going for you at the same time, in my mind, to generate economic freedom. So those are my thoughts.
I'm just wondering if you think okay, your turn. I'm wondering if you think that, or have you experienced that wellness or economic freedom or safety even is defined at all by geography or location or different areas that you've lived in?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that geography is absolutely like another form of like access to capital, right? I think that it's really hard for me to answer the question. Like, so I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. People are like, oh, like, when are you going back home? And I'm like, I don't know what that looks like, right? Because I left home for a reason, not necessarily, well, one, like, emotional trauma, and two, emotional trauma because of economic trauma, right? There, like, a lot of it was like growing up, you kind of knew there were certain bins of income and jobs that were available to you. And, that's super defeating when you're like, I don't think I fit in any of these categories. That doesn't fit my skill set. It doesn't make me feel whole. Like it's hard for me to imagine. So one of the reasons why I worked really, really, really hard, maybe a little too hard to get into colleges outside of, my entire state. Like the whole state looked really bleak to me, right? And coming to California because I knew that there were more opportunities, more diversity of resources, things like that. That like, yeah, it's hard, but I miss so much about home, and like I want so much economic freedom for my community back home. So also part of me being here in this different place is like still trying to stay connected and take these resources and like network them towards my friends and my family and the people I love back home too, right? So it's not just about me as an individual trying to make it out, but it's me trying to like create these like bigger hubs of community between the places that hoard or hold a lot of resources and the places that don't.
I love it. So thank you very much for being here. I have one last facilitator note before we get out of here, and that is just that the next session, which is the Monday 10-11 session, will actually not be live. It'll be a video. The video will be uploaded to the Citywide Challenge microsite and to the YouTube link. So that session is not live, but there will be a session. Thank you very much for everybody showing up. You with me? Let's build.